In the glittering halls of
Excuse
the
me,
kingdom
Mr.
of
Soldier?
Valdoria,
Better
where
come, guard.
tradition weighs
course,
heavier
ma'am.
than
Your hat
crowns
is
and
so
loyalty
tall.
runs deeper than bloodlines. One man's unwavering devotion to honor is about to shake the very foundations of the royal court. Captain Marcus Thornfield has served the royal family for 15 years without question, but when an innocent young princess becomes the target of palace cruelty, even the most faithful guardian must choose between blind obedience and moral courage. What happens when the protector becomes the protected's only hope for justice? Captain Marcus Thornfield stood at attention in the marble corridors of Valdoria Palace, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as the morning sun filtered through the towering stained glass windows. At 42, he had dedicated half his life to serving the royal family, earning his position through merit rather than birthright. His dark uniform bore the silver insignia of the Royal Guard, each medal representing years of unwavering loyalty to the crown. The kingdom of Valdoria had known peace for 3 generations, nestled between rolling green hills and protected by ancient treaties with neighboring realms. King Edmund ruled with a steady hand, beloved by his people for his fairness and wisdom. Queen Isabella had passed away 5 years prior, leaving behind a grieving widower and their daughter, Princess Elora, who was now 16 and the apple of her father's eye. 2 years ago, everything changed when King Edmund remarried. Lady Camilla Blackthorne arrived at court with impeccable credentials. Daughter of a respected duke from the eastern provinces, educated in the finest finishing schools, and possessed of a beauty that turned heads throughout the kingdom. The marriage had been both a political alliance and, supposedly, a love match that brought new hope to the grieving king. Marcus had initially welcomed Queen Camilla's arrival. The king seemed revitalized, his laughter once again echoing through the palace halls. The kingdom celebrated the union with festivals that lasted a week, and even the most skeptical courtiers appeared charmed by their new queen's grace and intelligence. But Marcus was trained to observe, and what he observed in the months following the royal wedding troubled him deeply. The first incident occurred during Princess Ilara's birthday celebration. Marcus had been stationed near the royal dining hall when he noticed Queen Camilla's sharp whisper to one of the servants. Within minutes, Princess Ilara's favorite dessert, a chocolate soufflé prepared by the kitchen staff who had known her since childhood, was replaced with a plain custard. When the young princess asked about the change, Queen Camilla smoothly explained that such rich foods were inappropriate for a growing young lady who needed to maintain her figure for future royal duties. King Edmund, distracted by conversations with visiting dignitaries, missed the exchange entirely. Princess Ilara's face fell, but she said nothing, having been raised with impeccable royal manners. Marcus watched as the girl's eyes filled with tears she refused to shed publicly. The second incident was more subtle but equally troubling. Marcus noticed that Princess Ilara's writing lessons, something she had passionately enjoyed since childhood, were suddenly cancelled due to scheduling conflicts. Her art classes, music lessons, and time with her beloved tutor, Master Geoffrey, were similarly reduced. When Marcus discreetly inquired with the palace scheduler, he learned that Queen Camilla had personally revised the princess's daily routine to include more appropriate feminine pursuits like embroidery and deportment lessons. The pattern became clearer over the following months. Queen Camilla never openly confronted Princess Ilara or issued direct commands. Instead, she worked through subtle manipulations, always with a reasonable explanation that would satisfy King Edmund if he asked. The princess's friends from noble families found their invitations to the palace mysteriously reduced. Her favorite horse was moved to a distant stable for better care. Her rooms were redecorated in colors she disliked, justified as being more mature for a princess approaching marriageable age. Marcus found himself in an impossible position. His duty was to protect the royal family, but from what? Queen Camilla committed no overt acts of cruelty. She never raised her hand or voice to Princess Ilara. In fact, she was unfailingly polite and even affectionate in public, often praising the princess for her beauty and grace. To outside observers, she appeared to be a caring stepmother guiding her new daughter toward proper royal behavior. But Marcus saw what others missed. He saw the light gradually dimming in Princess Ilara's eyes. He watched as her confident stride became hesitant steps. He noticed how she began to speak less at dinner, how her laughter became rare and forced the vibrant, intelligent young woman, who had once debated philosophy with her tutors and charmed foreign ambassadors with her quick wit, was slowly disappearing. The breaking point came on a cold February morning when Marcus discovered Princess Alara in the palace library, crying silently over a letter. When he gently inquired about her distress, she initially tried to hide her tears, but her composure cracked under his kind concern. "It's from Master Geoffrey," she whispered, showing him the letter. "Queen Camilla has dismissed him. She says I no longer need such intensive academic instruction and should focus on more practical skills for my future role." Marcus felt his jaw clench. Master Geoffrey had been Princess Alara's tutor since she was 8 years old. The elderly scholar had nurtured her love of learning and helped her develop the sharp intellect that had once been her pride. He was also one of the last remaining connections to her late mother, who had specifically chosen him for his daughter's education. "Did you speak with your father about this?" Marcus asked carefully. Princess Alara shook her head, wiping her eyes with a trembling hand. "Father is so happy with Queen Camilla. She makes him laugh again, and he seems younger somehow. I cannot burden him with my complaints about something as trivial as lessons." The word trivial cut through Marcus like a blade. This intelligent, caring young woman had been convinced that her own education and happiness were trivial concerns. He recognized the insidious nature of the manipulation. Princess Alara genuinely believed she was being selfish for wanting to keep her tutor. That evening, Marcus requested a private audience with King Edmund.
Of course, ma'am.
He had served the royal family long enough to earn such privileges, and the king received him in his private study with warm familiarity. "Your Majesty," Marcus began carefully, "I wish to discuss some concerns regarding Princess Alara's well-being." King Edmund looked up from his papers with immediate attention. "Is she ill? Has something happened?" "Not ill, Your Majesty, but changed. I have observed that she seems less spirited lately, and I wondered if you had noticed any difference in her behavior." The king leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowing. "Now that you mention it, she has been quieter recently. Queen Camilla mentioned that this is natural as Alara matures and prepares for her future responsibilities. Young women often go through such phases." Marcus chose his words with extreme care. "Perhaps, Your Majesty. However, I have also noticed several changes to her routine and activities. The dismissal of Master Geoffrey, for instance." "Ah, yes." King Edmund nodded. Camilla felt that Alara needed more practical instruction in household management and social graces. She's arranged for Lady Worthington to take over those aspects of her education. It's actually quite thoughtful. Camilla wants to ensure Alara is fully prepared for her eventual role as queen of whatever kingdom she marries into. The king's response revealed how skillfully Queen Camilla had presented these changes. Every decision was framed as caring preparation for Princess Alara's future, each restriction disguised as protection or improvement. Marcus realized that directly criticizing the queen would likely backfire and damage his own credibility. "Of course, Your Majesty." "I simply wanted to ensure that these transitions weren't causing the princess undue stress." King Edmund smiled warmly. "I appreciate your concern, Marcus. It shows why you've been such a valuable member of our household. I'll speak with Alara to make sure she's adjusting well to the changes." But Marcus knew that conversation would yield nothing. Princess Alara would never complain to her father about Queen Camilla, especially after being convinced that her concerns were selfish and her happiness was secondary to her royal duties. As he left the king's study, Marcus felt the weight of a terrible realization settling on his shoulders. The very loyalty and discretion that made him an excellent guard also made him powerless to help Princess Alara through conventional channels. Queen Camilla had created a situation where any complaint would seem petty or unfounded, where the victim herself had been manipulated into silence. Walking through the palace corridors that night, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He could not stand by and watch Princess Alara's spirit slowly crushed under the guise of proper royal training. His oath was to protect the royal family, and that included protecting them from threats that came from within their own walls. The next morning brought news that would escalate the situation beyond anything Marcus could have anticipated. Princess Alara failed to appear for breakfast, and when her lady-in-waiting went to check on her, she was found collapsed in her chambers, burning with fever and barely conscious. Part 2. The palace erupted into controlled chaos as physicians rushed to Princess Alara's bedside. Marcus stood guard outside her chambers, his trained ears catching fragments of worried conversations between doctors and servants. The princess had been discovered in a state of complete exhaustion, her body finally succumbing to months of emotional strain. Dr. Hamilton, the royal physician, emerged from the princess's rooms with a grave expression. Marcus watched as the elderly doctor approached King Edmund, who had arrived still wearing his mourning robe, his face pale with worry. "Your Majesty," Dr. Hamilton said quietly, "the princess's condition appears to be severe exhaustion, combined with what I can only describe as melancholia. Her body has simply given up fighting. But she's young and healthy," King Edmund protested. "How could this happen so suddenly?" Marcus saw Dr. Hamilton glance around nervously before responding. "Sometimes, Your Majesty, the mind's troubles can manifest in physical illness. Has the princess been under any particular stress lately?" Before King Edmund could respond, Queen Camilla appeared at the end of the corridor, her silk morning gown rustling as she hurried toward them. Her face was perfectly composed in an expression of concern, but Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. There was no surprise in her eyes. She had been expecting this. "How is dear Elara?" Queen Camilla asked, taking the king's arm with practiced grace. "I've been so worried about her lately. She seemed overwhelmed by her studies and responsibilities." Dr. Hamilton looked confused. "Overwhelmed?" "I was under the impression her schedule had been recently lightened." Queen Camilla's smile never wavered.
"Oh, but you know how seriously Elara takes everything."
"Even with fewer formal lessons, she's been putting tremendous pressure on herself to excel at her new deportment classes and household management training. I've tried to encourage her to relax, but she's such a perfectionist." Marcus felt sick listening to this masterful performance. Queen Camilla was rewriting the narrative, even as Princess Elara lay unconscious, turning the princess's obvious distress into evidence of her own caring nature and Elara's supposed perfectionism. King Edmund absorbed this explanation with visible relief. "That does sound like Elara," he agreed. Even as a child, she would work herself to exhaustion over her studies. "Perhaps," Dr. Hamilton said slowly, "it would be beneficial to speak with the princess about her concerns once she recovers. Sometimes talking through one's troubles can provide considerable relief." Of course, Queen Camilla agreed immediately. "I've been trying to encourage her to confide in me, but I think she still sees me as an outsider. These things take time." Marcus clenched his fists behind his back. The Queen's words were carefully chosen to deflect any potential criticism, while positioning herself as the understanding stepmother, trying her best with a difficult situation. As the group dispersed, Marcus lingered near Princess Elara's chambers. Through his connections with the palace staff, he had learned disturbing details about the princess's condition. Her lady-in-waiting, Sarah, had confided that Princess Elara had barely been eating for weeks, claiming she had no appetite. She had been staying up late into the night, sitting by her window and staring out at the gardens where she used to ride her horse. Most telling of all, Sarah had found several crumpled letters in the princess's wastepaper basket, letters she had apparently written to her father but never sent, begging to have Master Geoffrey reinstated and asking why she couldn't continue her riding lessons. That afternoon, Marcus made a decision that went against every protocol of royal service. He entered Princess Elara's chambers while she slept, not to threaten or intrude, but to leave something on her bedside table, a small note that simply read, "You are not alone. Your happiness matters. A friend." When Princess Elara woke 2 days later, Marcus was relieved to see some spark return to her eyes when she spotted the note. She looked around the room until her gaze met his, and he saw a flicker of hope cross her face. Recovery was slow, but as Princess Elara regained her strength, Marcus began to implement a careful plan. Using his position and the trust of palace staff, he started documenting every instance of Queen Camilla's manipulation. He noted dates, witnesses, and the subtle methods used to isolate and control the princess. The challenge was that Queen Camilla's tactics were so sophisticated that they left little concrete evidence. She never gave direct orders that could be traced back to her. Instead, she made suggestions to the king that he then implemented, or she influenced other courtiers to make recommendations that served her purposes. Marcus realized he needed allies, but choosing them required extreme caution. Speaking against the queen to the wrong person could result in his immediate dismissal and leave Princess Elara completely unprotected. His first ally came from an unexpected source, Lady Margaret Ashford, Queen Camilla's own lady-in-waiting, approached Marcus one evening in the servants' corridor. Lady Margaret was in her 50s, a widow who had served various noble houses throughout her career. "Captain Thornfield," she said quietly, "might I have a word with you?" They walked to a secluded alcove where Lady Margaret surprised him with her directness. "I know what you're trying to do," she said, "and I want to help." Marcus remained cautious. "I'm not sure what you mean, my lady." Lady Margaret's expression was grim. "I've served many households, Captain. I recognize the signs of a campaign designed to break someone's spirit. I've seen Queen Camilla employ similar tactics before, in her father's house." This revelation hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. Before? Her younger stepbrother. Lady Margaret explained. When Camilla was 18 and living in her father's estate, he remarried a woman with a son from her previous marriage. Within 2 years, that boy went from a confident 12-year-old to a withdrawn shadow who eventually begged to be sent to military school just to escape the house. Marcus felt the pieces clicking together. The same methods? Identical. Never direct confrontation. Always reasonable explanations. Constant subtle undermining disguised as helpful guidance. The boy's father never saw what was happening because Camilla was so skilled at appearing caring and concerned. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. Lady Margaret's face hardened. "Because I was young and needed the position then. I said nothing, and I've regretted it every day since. I won't make that mistake again." With Lady Margaret's help, Marcus began to build a more complete picture of Queen Camilla's behavior. Lady Margaret had access to the Queen's private conversations and could confirm that Camilla spoke about Princess Alara in calculating terms, discussing her as an obstacle to be managed rather than a stepdaughter to be loved. The breakthrough came when Lady Margaret overheard Queen Camilla speaking with Lady Worthington, the woman brought in to replace Master Geoffrey. Queen Camilla was giving specific instructions about Princess Alara's education that revealed her true motivations. "The girl is too intelligent for her own good," Queen Camilla had said. Her mother filled her head with inappropriate ideas about scholarship and independence. "We need to redirect her focus toward more suitable feminine accomplishments. I want her confidence in her intellectual abilities undermined gradually, not enough to cause rebellion, but enough to make her more malleable." Lady Worthington had apparently expressed some discomfort with this approach, prompting Queen Camilla to explain further. "Princess Alara's strong personality makes her a threat to stability. Future marriage negotiations will be much easier if she's more compliant. And I'll be a paper appellation. Her father will thank me eventually for helping her develop more appropriate royal deportment." This conversation, witnessed by Lady Margaret and later confirmed by a chambermaid who had been cleaning nearby, finally provided Marcus with concrete evidence of Queen Camilla's deliberate campaign against Princess Alara. But even with this evidence, Marcus faced the challenge of how to present it effectively. Queen Camilla's words could be interpreted as concern for proper royal behavior rather than malicious manipulation. Moreover, King Edmund was deeply in love with his new wife and predisposed to interpret her actions favorably. Marcus decided on a bold strategy. Rather than trying to convince King Edmund through accusation, he would force Queen Camilla to reveal her true nature through direct confrontation. The opportunity came during the Autumn Harvest Festival. Princess Alara, still recovering from her illness, had requested permission to attend the public celebrations in the village square. It was a tradition she had loved since childhood, mingling with the common people, watching the harvest displays, and participating in the dancing. Queen Camilla immediately objected, claiming that Princess Alara was still too weak for such exertion and that it would be inappropriate for someone of her station to participate in such rustic celebrations. King Edmund, caught between his daughter's obvious desire and his wife's seemingly reasonable concerns, hesitated. This was exactly the moment Marcus had been waiting for. "Your Majesty," Marcus interjected respectfully, "if I might suggest a compromise, I could accompany Princess Alara to the festival and ensure she doesn't overexert herself. The fresh air and familiar celebration might actually aid her recovery." King Edmund brightened at this solution. "That's an excellent idea, Marcus. You could keep an eye on her while allowing her to enjoy the festival." Queen Camilla's mask slipped for just an instant. Marcus caught a flash of pure fury in her eyes before she regained her composure. "Of course," she said smoothly, "though I do worry about the crowds and excitement. Captain Thornfield will manage the security perfectly," King Edmund declared, effectively ending the discussion. That evening, as Marcus prepared for the festival escort duty, he received an unexpected summons to Queen Camilla's private study. Part 3. Queen Camilla's private study was a testament to refined taste and subtle power. Rich burgundy curtains framed tall windows, and delicate porcelain figures adorned mahogany shelves that held leather-bound books more for display than reading. The queen sat behind an ornate desk, her posture perfect and her expression unreadable as Marcus entered and bowed appropriately. "Captain Thornfield," she began, her voice carrying the cultured tones of aristocratic education. "Please, sit. I believe we need to have a frank conversation." Marcus remained standing. "I prefer to stand, Your Majesty, unless you command otherwise." A thin smile crossed Queen Camilla's lips. "How admirably proper. Very well. I wanted to discuss your special interest in Princess Ilara's welfare." The words hung in the air like a blade. Marcus kept his expression neutral, though every instinct screamed danger. "My duty is to protect all members of the royal family, Your Majesty." "Indeed," Queen Camilla said, rising gracefully and moving to the window. "And you've been most diligent in that duty. However, I sense that you may have some concerns about my influence on dear Ilara." Marcus chose his words carefully. "I have observed that the princess has seemed less spirited lately." Queen Camilla turned to face him, and for the first time since her arrival at court, Marcus saw her true face. The mask of gentle concern had vanished, replaced by cold calculation and barely contained irritation. "Let me be perfectly clear, Captain," she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "Princess Ilara is a spoiled child who has been allowed to run wild for too long. Her mother filled her head with ridiculous notions about independence and intellectual pursuits that are completely inappropriate for her station." Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to remain silent. Queen Camilla continued, beginning to pace behind her desk like a predator circling prey. "A princess's role is to marry well and produce heirs while supporting her husband's political ambitions. She does not need to debate philosophy or study advanced mathematics. She needs to be graceful, compliant, and charming, qualities that require considerable work to develop in someone with Ilara's unfortunate tendencies." "The princess is intelligent and kind," Marcus said quietly. "Those seem like admirable qualities." "Intelligence in a woman can be dangerous," Queen Camilla replied sharply. "It breeds discontent and rebellion. Look at what happened to her mother. Isabella's intellectual pretensions made her question royal protocols and fill Ilara's head with inappropriate expectations." Marcus felt a surge of anger at this casual dismissal of the beloved late queen, but Queen Camilla wasn't finished. "I am doing what King Edmund lacks the strength to do, preparing Ilara for her real future. She will marry a foreign prince or duke, and she will need to be the kind of wife who supports rather than challenges her husband's authority. Her current personality would make such a marriage impossible." "And if Princess Ilara's happiness is destroyed in the process?" Marcus asked, abandoning all pretense of neutral observation. Queen Camilla's eyes flashed with triumph. "There it is," she said softly. "The insubordination I suspected. You've developed entirely inappropriate feelings for the princess, haven't you, Captain?" The accusation was like a physical blow. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face as he realized the trap Queen Camilla was laying. Any defense he offered could be twisted into evidence of improper attachment to Princess Ilara. "I care about Princess Ilara's welfare as I would any member of the royal family I'm sworn to protect," he said firmly. "How touching," Queen Camilla replied with mock sympathy. "But I think we both know your interest goes beyond professional duty. You've been watching me, questioning my methods, interfering with my efforts to guide Ilara toward appropriate behavior. That suggests a personal investment that goes well beyond the bounds of proper service." Marcus realized that Queen Camilla had been watching him just as carefully as he had been observing her. She had prepared for this confrontation and chosen her strategy with the same calculated precision she used in all her manipulations. "Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully, "my only concern is ensuring that Princess Ilara remains healthy and happy." "Happiness," Queen Camilla repeated with disdain. "Such a modern notion." Royal children are not raised for happiness, Captain. They are raised for duty. The fact that you prioritize Alara's momentary contentment over her long-term preparation for royal responsibility suggests that your judgment has been compromised. She returned to her desk and picked up a piece of paper that Marcus recognized with growing dread as official palace stationery. I have been considering recommending your transfer to a different position, Queen Camilla said conversationally. Perhaps border patrol duty or service with one of the provincial governors. Your skills would be valuable in such roles, and the change of scenery might help you gain proper perspective on appropriate professional boundaries. The threat was clear. Queen Camilla could have him removed from the palace, leaving Princess Alara completely unprotected. Without his presence, there would be no one to witness or document the ongoing manipulation, and the princess would be completely isolated. But Marcus had spent 15 years learning to read people, and he sensed something in Queen Camilla's manner that gave him hope. She was threatening transfer rather than immediate dismissal, which suggested she wasn't entirely confident in her position. If she had ironclad evidence of inappropriate behavior, she would move more decisively. I understand your concerns, Your Majesty, Marcus said, making a decision that would either save Princess Alara or destroy his career. However, I should inform you that my observations regarding the princess's treatment have not gone unnoticed by others. Queen Camilla's composed expression flickered for just an instant. What others? Doctor. Hamilton has noted the correlation between changes in Princess Alara's routine and her declining health. Several staff members have commented on the princess's obvious unhappiness. And there are those who remember how vibrant and confident she was before. Recent changes. It was a careful bluff, mixing truth with implication. Dr. Hamilton had indeed noted Princess Alara's condition, though he hadn't explicitly connected it to Queen Camilla's influence. The staff had noticed changes, though most attributed them to normal growing up rather than deliberate manipulation. Queen Camilla's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me, Captain? Not at all, Your Majesty. I'm simply noting that Princess Alara's welfare is observed by many people who care about her. Any sudden changes in her circumstances, such as the removal of her primary protector, might raise uncomfortable questions. For several long moments, Queen Camilla stared at him in silence. Marcus could practically see her mind working, calculating risks and benefits, weighing her options against the potential consequences. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying a new edge of respect, mixed with hatred. You're more clever than I initially gave you credit for, Captain Thornfield. Very well. Continue in your position, for now. But understand that I am watching you very carefully, and any misstep on your part will have severe consequences. I understand perfectly, Your Majesty. Good, Queen Camilla said, settling back into her chair with renewed composure. Now, regarding tomorrow's festival, I trust you will ensure that Princess Alara doesn't overexert herself or engage in any behavior that might be considered inappropriate for her station. Marcus bowed formally. Of course, Your Majesty. I will ensure Princess Alara's safety and proper conduct. As he left Queen Camilla's study, Marcus felt both victorious and terrified. He had bought time and maintained his position, but he had also declared open war against a formidable opponent. Queen Camilla now knew that he was actively working against her interests, which would make future maneuvers exponentially more dangerous. That night, Marcus met secretly with Lady Margaret in the palace garden. Under the cover of darkness, they discussed the confrontation and its implications. She showed her true face, Lady Margaret observed. That's something, at least. But she also knows I'm watching her now, Marcus replied. She'll be more careful, more subtle in her methods. Perhaps, Lady Margaret agreed. Or perhaps she'll become more desperate and make a mistake. Cornered predators often reveal themselves more clearly. Marcus hoped she was right, but he knew that the upcoming festival would be a critical test. Queen Camilla would be watching for any excuse to remove him from his position, while he needed to find a way to demonstrate her true nature to King Edmund. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Perfect weather for the harvest festival. Marcus arrived early to Princess Alara's chambers to escort her to the celebrations. When she emerged, he was struck by the first genuine smile he had seen from her in months. Thank you for arranging this, Captain Thornfield, she said quietly. I wasn't certain Father would allow it. "Your happiness matters, Your Highness," Marcus replied, echoing the message he had left on her bedside table weeks earlier. Princess Alara's eyes met his with a look of understanding and gratitude that confirmed she had received his note and understood its meaning. As they made their way through the palace corridors toward the village, Marcus noticed Queen Camilla watching from an upper window, her face a mask of cold fury. The real battle was about to begin. Part 4. The Harvest Festival proved to be a revelation that would change everything. As Marcus escorted Princess Alara through the bustling village square, he watched the transformation that came over her with each passing hour. The young woman who had been slowly disappearing under Queen Camilla's influence began to re-emerge as she interacted with the villagers who had known her since childhood. Old Mrs. Henderson, the baker's wife, embraced Princess Alara warmly and insisted she try the special honey cakes made from her late mother's recipe. Thomas, the blacksmith's son, now a young man of 19, bowed respectfully but couldn't hide his joy at seeing the princess who had once helped him catch fireflies during summer festivals. The village children gathered around her as she had always encouraged them to do, sharing stories and showing off their festival costumes. Marcus positioned himself strategically, maintaining security while allowing Princess Alara the freedom to engage naturally with her people. What he observed confirmed everything he had suspected about Queen Camilla's true intentions. Princess Alara wasn't overwhelmed or inappropriate in her interactions with the common people. Instead, she was gracious, intelligent, and genuinely caring, qualities that made the villagers love her even more. She listened to their concerns about the upcoming winter preparations, offered thoughtful suggestions about community projects, and remembered personal details about their families that demonstrated both her excellent memory and her sincere interest in their welfare. "Your Highness remembers everything," marveled Sarah Fletcher, the seamstress, after Princess Alara inquired about her grandson's recovery from a broken leg. "You truly care about us all." This was exactly the kind of connection that made Princess Alara dangerous to Queen Camilla's plans. A princess beloved by her people, confident in her abilities, and secure in her identity would be much harder to manipulate into a submissive marriage alliance. The turning point came during the afternoon dancing. Princess Alara had always loved the traditional folk dances, and despite months of discouragement, she couldn't resist joining the circles of dancers in the square. Marcus watched as years of careful deportment training fell away, replaced by genuine joy and natural grace. She danced with farmers and merchants, elderly grandmothers, and young children, laughing with pure delight, for the first time Marcus had seen since Queen Camilla's arrival. The villagers responded to her obvious happiness with increased affection, creating a circle of warmth and acceptance that surrounded the princess like armor. It was then that Marcus noticed Queen Camilla approaching through the crowd, accompanied by several court ladies and looking distinctly out of place in her formal attire. Her face was composed in an expression of gentle concern, but Marcus could read the fury beneath the surface. "My dear Alara," Queen Camilla called out as she reached the dancing area, "how wonderful to see you enjoying yourself, though I do worry you might be overdoing things so soon after your illness." The effect on Princess Alara was immediate and heartbreaking. Her laughter died, her shoulders tensed, and the light in her eyes dimmed as she automatically stepped away from the other dancers. "Queen Camilla," she said formally, offering a proper curtsy. "I didn't expect to see you here. Well, when Captain Thornfield mentioned how excited you were about attending, I thought I should come ensure everything was proceeding appropriately," Queen Camilla replied smoothly, her eyes scanning the scene with calculated assessment. Marcus felt his anger building as he watched Queen Camilla's presence immediately change the dynamic of the entire festival. The villagers became more formal and distant, unsure of how to behave around the intimidating new queen. Princess Alara retreated into the careful composure that had become her default mode of survival. "Perhaps it would be wise to return to the palace soon," Queen Camilla suggested. "You look rather flushed, dear, and I wouldn't want you to suffer a relapse." Princess Alara nodded obediently, despite having shown no signs of fatigue or distress before Queen Camilla's arrival. "Of course, stepmother." Captain Thornfield, shall we prepare to leave? But before Marcus could respond, old Mrs. Henderson approached the group with surprising boldness. "Begging your pardon, Your Majesty," she said to Queen Camilla, "but might Princess Alara stay just a bit longer? The children have prepared a special song for her, and they've been practicing for weeks." Queen Camilla's smile became strained. "How thoughtful. but I'm sure the children will understand that the princess needs to rest. It would only take a few minutes, Mrs. Garles. Henderson persisted with the fearlessness of advanced age. The little ones would be so disappointed if they couldn't perform for their princess. Marcus watched this exchange with growing interest. Queen Camilla was trapped between appearing unreasonably controlling and allowing Princess Alara to continue enjoying herself. Any direct refusal would seem churlish in front of the villagers, who obviously adored Princess Alara. "Well," Queen Camilla said slowly, "I suppose a few more minutes wouldn't hurt." The children's performance was simple but moving. A traditional song about the changing seasons and the importance of community. Princess Alara watched with obvious delight, clapping enthusiastically and thanking each child personally afterward. But it was what happened next that provided Marcus with the opportunity he had been hoping for. As the crowd began to disperse, a young mother approached Princess Alara with a baby in her arms. "Your Highness, would you mind blessing little Catherine? She was born during the spring planting, and tradition says a royal blessing brings good fortune." Princess Alara immediately reached for the baby with natural maternal instincts, cradling the infant gently and speaking soft words of blessing. The scene was touching and entirely appropriate, exactly the kind of interaction that endeared royalty to their subjects. But Queen Camilla stepped forward quickly. "Alara, dear, you shouldn't handle other people's children without knowing their health status. It's not sanitary, and you're still recovering from illness." The young mother's face flushed with embarrassment and hurt. Princess Alara looked torn between returning the baby and continuing the traditional blessing that meant so much to the family. Marcus made his choice in that moment. "Your Majesty," he said respectfully to Queen Camilla, "royal blessings of newborns have been a Valdorian tradition for over 2 centuries. King Edmund himself was blessed by his grandfather as an infant." Queen Camilla's eyes flashed with anger at this public contradiction of her authority. "Times change, Captain. Modern hygiene practices must take precedence over outdated customs." "Perhaps," Marcus replied calmly, "but the decision should be Princess Alara's to make. She is, after all, the one performing the blessing." The gathered villagers watched this exchange with growing interest. They could sense the underlying tension, even if they didn't fully understand its source. Princess Alara looked between Marcus and Queen Camilla, clearly recognizing that this moment was about much more than blessing a baby. For the first time in months, she was being offered a choice: to submit to Queen Camilla's control or assert her own judgment. "The blessing is important to the family," Princess Alara said quietly, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "And little Catherine is clearly healthy and well cared for. I see no reason not to continue the tradition my father and grandfather honored." She completed the blessing while Queen Camilla stood rigid with barely controlled fury. The villagers murmured approval, and Marcus saw several of them exchanging meaningful glances. They had witnessed their beloved princess standing up to the new queen, and they clearly approved. The journey back to the palace was conducted in tense silence. Queen Camilla maintained her composure, but Marcus could see the storm building behind her carefully composed facade. That evening, Marcus was summoned to King Edmund's study for what he knew would be the most important conversation of his career. "Marcus," King Edmund began, gesturing for him to sit, "I've received some concerning reports about today's festival." Marcus remained standing. "What kind of reports, Your Majesty?" "Queen Camilla is worried that you may be encouraging Princess Alara to behave inappropriately. She mentioned some incident regarding hygiene protocols and traditional ceremonies." Marcus had prepared for this moment. "Your Majesty, I simply reminded everyone that royal blessings have been a valued tradition in Valdoria for generations. Princess Alara performed the blessing exactly as you did as a child, and as your father did before you." King Edmund looked confused. "That doesn't sound inappropriate." "Queen Camilla was concerned about hygiene," Marcus continued carefully, "but the baby was obviously healthy, and Princess Alara took appropriate care. More importantly, the villagers were deeply moved by her willingness to honor their traditions." "Well, that certainly doesn't sound problematic," King Edmund agreed. "In fact, it sounds like Alara was behaving exactly as a princess should." Marcus seized the opening. "Your Majesty, if I may speak frankly, I believe Princess Alara has been struggling with conflicting guidance about appropriate royal behavior. She's a thoughtful young woman trying to balance traditional expectations with newer interpretations of royal duty. King Edmund's expression grew more serious. What do you mean by conflicting guidance? Marcus chose his words with extreme care. Princess Elara has always modeled her behavior on your example and that of Queen Isabella. However, she's recently been given different instruction about proper royal conduct. Instruction that sometimes conflicts with the traditions and values she was raised with. Are you saying Queen Camilla's guidance contradicts established royal protocol? I'm saying that Princess Elara appears confused about expectations, Marcus replied diplomatically. She seems unsure whether to follow the traditional approach you and Queen Isabella demonstrated, or to adopt newer methods that emphasize different aspects of royal deportment. King Edmund was quiet for several long minutes, clearly processing this information. Marcus held his breath, knowing that everything depended on the king's ability to recognize the truth beneath his careful words. Marcus, King Edmund said finally, I want you to continue as Princess Elara's primary guard, and I want you to encourage her to behave according to traditional Valdorian royal standards, the standards her mother and I taught her. Marcus felt a surge of relief and triumph. Of course, Your Majesty. If there are any further conflicts about appropriate behavior, I want you to come to me immediately. Princess Elara should never be confused about what's expected of her. As Marcus left the king's study, he realized that the battle wasn't won, but the tide had finally turned. King Edmund was beginning to see the contradictions in his daughter's situation, even if he hadn't yet identified their source. The real test came the next morning when Queen Camilla summoned Marcus to her study again. This time her composure had cracked completely. You think you're very clever, she said without preamble, turning my husband against me with your insinuations and manipulations. Marcus remained calm. I simply provided an accurate report of yesterday's events, Your Majesty. You deliberately undermined my authority in public and encouraged Elara to defy my guidance. I encouraged Princess Elara to follow established royal traditions, as is my duty. Queen Camilla's mask slipped entirely. Your duty is to obey my instructions regarding that spoiled little girl's behavior. My duty, Marcus said firmly, is to protect all members of the royal family and uphold the traditions of this kingdom. Princess Elara is not spoiled. She's intelligent, compassionate, and exactly what a Valdorian princess should be. Queen Camilla stared at him with naked hatred. You're making a terrible mistake, Captain. I will not be defeated by a common guard with delusions of importance. I'm not trying to defeat anyone, Your Majesty. I'm simply doing my job. Your job, Queen Camilla spat, is whatever I say it is. Marcus met her gaze steadily. With respect, Your Majesty. My oath was sworn to King Edmund and the crown of Valdoria. My loyalty is to the royal family and the kingdom's traditions, not to any individual's personal agenda. The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. Queen Camilla's face went white with rage, and Marcus knew that any pretense of civility between them was over. Get out, she whispered. Get out before I have you arrested for insubordination. As Marcus left Queen Camilla's chambers, he encountered Princess Elara in the corridor. She looked at him with questions in her eyes, clearly having heard the raised voices from within. Captain Thornfield, she said quietly, are you all right? Marcus smiled at her genuine concern. I'm perfectly fine, Your Highness, and so are you. Never forget that. Princess Elara straightened her shoulders with a confidence Marcus hadn't seen in months. I won't forget, she promised, looking at her in that moment. Standing tall, eyes bright with renewed determination, Marcus knew that whatever consequences followed, he had made the right choice. Princess Elara was remembering who she was meant to be, and no amount of manipulation would ever diminish her again. The loyal guard's ultimatum had been delivered, not through words alone, but through actions that honored duty above convenience and truth above comfort. Sometimes protecting the royal family meant protecting them from the very people who claimed to have their best interests at heart. Guard's ultimatum. Loyal guard refuses to serve until Camilla makes amends to Princess Charlotte.